Today's video is brought to you by the subscribe button and the notification bell. Don't forget to click both of them down below. Hey, what's up guys? Joker here, and I hope you're all doing well. Today we are going to be continuing with our off-site CES coverage for the year 2020. Today's first topic, we'll be talking about AMD, who after their keynote the other day gave some backstage answers to the press where they addressed things like Big Navi, as well as ray tracing coming to Navi GPUs in the year 2020, and we also did get the big reveal for the 5600 XT, so we'll talk about that. And Intel finally showed off the Xe GPU, the DG1, very briefly on stage, so we'll talk about what they showed there with the little bit of information that we do have so far. But we're going to kick things off talking about AMD. In case you missed it, they did have their keynote the other day where they talked about Ryzen 4000 series in laptops. We didn't get a ton of information about the desktop variants. They started off talking about mobile and things like that, but also they did reveal the 5600, and then after the keynote, they did sit down with some of the press. This is pretty typical for these types of trade shows, where after the keynote, they'll bring a bunch of the media backstage and they'll field questions that maybe weren't answered directly on stage and give the best PR answer they could possibly give at this time with the information that they're legally allowed to actually reveal. So some of the big questions that I wanted to focus on were about Big Navi, as well as ray tracing coming to AMD graphics cards finally in the year 2020, which I think we all expected to see, as the next generation of consoles coming out later this year are going to be running on Navi GPUs and Ryzen processors, and those have already both revealed for the PS5 and the Xbox Series X to be supporting ray tracing in the future. So the first question came from Dean Takahashi from VentureBeat, who asked Lisa Su, is real-time ray tracing in graphics going to be as big as NVIDIA says it is? Which Lisa Su responded, I've said in the past that ray tracing is important, and I still believe that. But if you look at where we are today, it's still very early. We are investing heavily in ray tracing and investing heavily in the ecosystem around it. Both of our console partners have also said that they are using ray tracing. You should expect that our discrete graphics, as we go through 2020, will also have ray tracing. I do believe, though, it's still very early and the ecosystem needs to develop. We need more games and more software and more applications to take advantage of it. At AMD, we feel very good about our position on ray tracing. So there you have it from Dr. Lisa Su's mouth. We will be seeing ray tracing by the end of 2020 in AMD graphics cards, and I also could not agree with her more about how early it is for ray tracing. I think that's why NVIDIA has gotten so much, kind of backlash from the, the hardcore community out there that are following graphics and stuff so closely, is that, yes, they are on the cutting edge putting this stuff out there, but the products that they're putting out are extremely expensive, and the performance is not what I think a lot of people want, even though our expectations should be a little more realistic because of how early on it is with the technology. And then the other aspect of that is that there just aren't enough games really to warrant going out and spending, let's say, $1,200 on a card specifically for ray tracing, not taking anything away from the 2080 Ti and what it can do in traditional rasterization performance, as I love mine for 4K. It's an absolute beast. It's the fastest graphics card they've pretty much ever made for the consumer market, and I love my 2080 Ti. I just don't really love it for ray tracing. For the 4K performance, phenomenal. But I'd be lying if I told you I really ever use it for ray tracing during my typical gameplay scenarios. So hopefully we'll see AMD start to adopt this, and then once both companies have adopted ray tracing on their dedicated GPUs, that's just going to open up the market even more for more companies, more game developers, more software to come along and support ray tracing, because I definitely believe ray tracing is the way of the future, and probably in 3 to 5 years from now, we won't even really need to be talking about ray tracing, because it's just going to be the expected norm. I don't believe that it's a passing fad or anything like that. It's just going to become the way things are, and it won't even really be much of a topic of discussion anymore. It's just going to be the way we accept it. The other big question is Big Navi, as AMD has pretty much been focusing on the low to mid-range market, with their highest end Navi GPU right now being the 5700 XT. Gordon Ung asked about Big Navi possibly coming, and he asked this. He said, do you think that AMD has to have a high-end competitor in the discrete graphics market. And Lisa Sue laughing says, I know those on Reddit want a high-end Navi. You should expect that we will have a high-end Navi and that it is important to have it. The discrete graphics market, especially at the high end, is very important to us, so you should expect that we will have a high-end Navi, although I don't usually comment on unannounced products. So really, she's acknowledging the existence of the future, maybe 5800 XT or 5900 XT cards, which will probably be competing with the likes of the 2080. I really don't think they'll be competing with something like the 2080 Ti, but if they want to put these cards out and compete with NVIDIA, they better hurry up, because we have already talked about Ampere, and which is more or less kind of confirmed for coming in the second half of 2020. So if they are, maybe hitting summer for coming out with these cards competing with the 2080, NVIDIA is already going to have a product out which beats it. So AMD is still kind of playing catch up, although when they have played catch up, they're actually kind of beating them in some ways, like 5700 XT and price to performance versus NVIDIA. They're actually winning there, but the only problem is that they took a much longer time to actually get to that point, which is just kind of sad to see, because they have a very solid product, but NVIDIA just continues to beat them to market, which is definitely hurting them in terms of the graphics cards. So speaking of graphics cards from AMD, we did get the big reveal for the RX 5600 XT, which is obviously, as you'd expect, going to be nestled somewhere between the 5500 XT and the 5700. It is very much a cut down version of the 5700 with basically a very tight bandwidth for memory, as the specs for the memory side of things are not very impressive, although in terms of core count, you can see it's rocking 2,304, the same as the 5700 non-XT model, still running on Navi 10. The clock speeds are going to be cut down a fair bit, but I don't think it's going to impact it hugely. I don't think it's going to be much slower in terms of clock speeds, as you can probably overclock these and get them pretty close to the 5700. It's only going to have 6 gigabytes of GDDR6 memory, but that's not a huge limiting factor, honestly, for 1080p gaming. I really think the memory bus, memory bandwidth is going to be what is going to hurt the 5600 XT, as it's only rocking a 192-bit memory bus compared to the 256 on both 5700 and the 5700 XT models respectively. It's going to have a 12 gigabit per second memory clock, and the bandwidth is going to be the huge one here at 288 gigabytes per second. When you look at 5700 and the XT model, both are at 448 gigabytes per second. So that's almost half the memory bandwidth of the 5700 and XT card, and it's going to be coming in at $279, so $70 less than the 5700. But I am concerned about the memory bandwidth and how it's going to be able to keep up in terms of performance with that. They did show some initial slides with showing it about 5 to 15% faster than the 1660 Super OC card, or about 10 to 20% faster than the 1660 Ti, and significantly faster than the 1060 6GB card, which is definitely a few years old now, as you would expect. I would hope that they are going to be faster than that. But coming in at $279, it's going to be a competitive price point, obviously, competing with the likes of the 1660 Ti and the 16 Super. I would definitely want to see how this is going to line up with the 2060. So that is definitely a card that I plan to test against the 5600 series, rather, as I'll be curious to see how close they can get to that when they are coming in at a pretty decent price under the what the 2060 is selling for. So if they can get close to that at $279, this could end up being a pretty big win for AMD, as opposed to the 5500 cards, which I did feel were a little bit lackluster and didn't really make much sense to go out and pick up when you could already get RX 580s and 590s for about the same price. And as I showed in my testing and my review, the 590 and 580s actually beat the 5500 cards. Last up, Intel Xe and DG1 discrete graphics. They did finally show off a demo for the DG1 discrete graphics running on a laptop. They showed a very, very brief demo of Destiny 2 running on it, but I really just feel like this was more or less a proof of concept thing, like, hey, look, we have graphics card, or GPU rather, and it can run games, although the graphics on it did kind of appear to be potato. There was like some very, very rough anti-aliasing. So this was running on a mobile GPU, so I wasn't really expecting them to just knock it out of the park right out of the gate. But this is just a proof of concept, like I said, for Intel to say we have GPUs and they're going to be coming in the future, which is great to see them entering into the market, competing with AMD and NVIDIA, and hopefully we get to see their discrete desktop GPUs at some point in the year 2020 as well, as I feel like most of us are probably much more interested in seeing that than seeing a very brief, like 3-second demo of Destiny 2 with no performance metrics, no idea of what type of settings or resolution they were playing at. But the graphics, from what I can tell, as I said, looked pretty potato with the anti-aliasing on some of the straight lines in the video that they showed. Again, it was like literally 3 seconds long, so it was brief. So they don't really have much to show right now to get us excited about DG1, but at least we got to see it. It's, you know, it's working. They have that to brag about right now, is it's working, so they're making progress, I suppose. But that's all I've got for you guys today on CES 2020, news coming out of AMD as well as Intel. Nothing really too big from NVIDIA. We already talked about the 360 hertz monitors, which was just kind of meh. I don't think, I was honestly surprised that as many people in the comments section completely agreed with me on that. I thought I was going to get a lot of backlash talking shit about the 360 hertz monitor. I thought there was going to be some guy like, oh, I've got 2080 Ti, 240 hertz, can't wait for 360 hertz. Like, no, there was like maybe like one guy like that, honestly. So I was very surprised that people agreed with me about the 360 meh concept of those new monitors that NVIDIA is partnering up with Asus on. But as I said, that's all I've got for CES 2020 today. I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. Make sure you are subscribed and stay tuned for more coverage of CES throughout the week as we get more news topics or anything else that comes up throughout the tech and PC gaming industry. If you enjoyed this video, leave a thumbs up on it, and I'll see you guys in the comments and tomorrow for another video.